What's up guys, and welcome to the 28th tutorial in my PHP backend. So in this tutorial we're going to have a little look at something called middleware. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but in here when I define the routes I actually already added a variable called middleware that is going to take our name of the middleware that we want to use. And if you're not familiar with middleware, it's actually quite an easy topic theoretically, because the only thing that it does is when you make a call, you can add a middleware on your route, and the middleware gets run either after or before the actual function in the controller that we're going to call. So basically, if we have a look in the route here, when we call the user function array here, we're gonna have called all the previous middlewares on that route before this get called. And also the middleware will be able to define the order of the middleware, because you can have multiple middlewares on each route, and also this will be run in the scope of the last middleware. But everything will be clear once we have the implementation in. I'm gonna make a demonstration for you so you kind of grasp the context. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a new middleware. So in my app folder, I'm going to create a new package or a directory, and I'm going to call it middleware. And in here, I'm going to create a new PHP class, and I'm going to call it middleware. And I'm going to go ahead and make it abstract. And it's going to extend the controller. And the reason for this is that I want to have the output things that all the controllers also have. And so this one, yeah. And at this point there will actually be no implementation in here, and that's going to change later probably, but for now let's keep it empty. So now we're going to create a new specific middleware. So for example, when I post to this endpoint right here, I'm going to give it a body, and it's going to create a new color. So if we have a look at our middleware, or a route, sorry, it'll be this route right here. So it's a post, and we're going to add a middleware in here, and it's going to run the color controller dot create color. So we're also going to need the create color function because it's not defined right now. So let's just go ahead and implement this. And it's going to take also the request and the response. And I think we're just going to go ahead and respond with the stuff that we got as an input. So right here we have the body. It's going to be equal to the request, and then we get body like this, and this will give us a text string, so we need to parse it. So JSON decode, and I'm going to give it true. And this basically says that I want to parse it as an array, otherwise I'll get an object. So now we have a parsed PHP array here, and we're going to put it in there. So it's going to echo back. So let's see if it works. And as you can see, it just echoes back whatever I post. So that works. Great. And now I want to create a middleware for validation of this endpoint. So I want to check that this variable called name was actually posted. And if it was posted, I want to run the create color function. But if it was not added, I would just want to return an empty 404 or a 400 message, which is a bad request. And the first thing that I need to do is that I need to create a new middleware for this. I'm gonna call it, let's see, our name. Let's call it name validation. And it's gonna extend the middleware. And by the way, I think we need to give this a namespace as well. So namespace, it'll be the app and middleware. And of course, the name validation will also be in that namespace. All right, so now we need to do I'm in the working directory right here, so I need to do a composer dump outload in order to be able to use these new namespaces that I just created. So let's go ahead and do that. Right, so now I have a proper outload file. And in here, I want to use one of the functions provided by PHP, which is something called a magic function. And I suggest you read up on what magic functions are in PHP, but it's kind of awesome in a way because it enables you to do some really crazy stuff with PHP. And because of that, it gives you more power and flexibility, which can be a good thing, of course, but it could also be a bad thing if you don't use it properly. So what I want to do, I'm going to copy paste this because I prepared it in advance. So this is my function, and you can see it starts with 2 underscores and then invoke. And what this means is that if I create an instance of this name validation class, I'm gonna be able to call it just like if it was a function. So basically I will be able to do something like this: validation equals new and then name validation, like this. And the instance of this, the validation here, is gonna be this function right here called invoke. So I'm going to be able to call it like a function and pass in the request and response and next. And that's how invoke works. And you can also look into the PHP documentation, of course. And what this middleware does, it's going to get the request and the response on something called next. And first thing, it's going to collect the body as an array. It's going to check if the body contains a name variable, which is this one right here. And if it has that variable, it's going to call the next function. And otherwise, it's going to respond with a 400 status, which is for bad request. So the logic here is pretty simple. And the next variable right here, that's going to be a callable. So if you, for example, have multiple middlewares running after each other, when you call next here, it's going to execute the next middleware. And if this is the last middleware, it's going to execute the function in the controller, which contains the logic. And I'm going to demonstrate this to you later so you get a clear understanding of how this actually works. Now we need to add the middleware on our actual route. So app, the name for it was, let's see, app, middleware, and then name validation. So app, middleware, then name validation. So we need a fully qualified name right now. And let's see, so that was that. And now we need to put some logic in here before we call the actual route function. So what I want to do is I want to run all middleware. And only if all the middleware passes, I want to actually run this. And the way to do it is with something like this. So I created this function that I call run middleware. And I'm just going to copy paste it in here so you can see it properly. and it's a static function since the route function is also static. It needs to be static, and it gets all the callables, which will be the middlewares, and it's going to be recursive, so I need a counter, and then it's going to keep on sending in the request and the response object that I need in the end, where I also need the request and response in the actual middleware. And then I also have a callback for whenever all the middleware has run. So the first thing that it does, it checks our exit condition for the recursive, and it checks if the counter is less than the count of callables. And that means basically that there are no more callables left to call. And in that case, it's gonna call the last one, the callback, for telling the outer function that it's done. But if there is any middleware to run, it's gonna collect them. And here is the thing that I showed you with invoke. So in here, it's gonna instantiate this callable, which will be a text string, and then it's gonna collect the index of the actual middleware. So you end up with the middleware here. And then right here, I'm gonna call it. So I'm gonna call it, I'm gonna send in the request and the response and the next function. And the next function, if I just cut this out, you'll see that in here on the third place, it's gonna get the next function. So in the actual middleware in here, it's this one. So the one we called whenever it passes. And I'm gonna give it an anonymous function, and I'm gonna use use in order to be able to use these parameters in the closure in here. And I'm gonna run it recursively. So I'm gonna run it again, and I'm gonna send in the callables and everything that it needs. And I'm also gonna increment the counter by 1. So it's like a loop basically, but it's recursive. And this is the actual implementation of running the middleware. So now we need to give it the proper startup parameters, and we're going to do that here. And let me see this part right here. And I'm going to comment this out for now. All right, so we call the function that we just defined. We're going to collect all the middlewares from the route, and that'll be the callables. And we're going to give it a counter of 0. And this for the first iteration, of course, we're gonna is an index-based iteration, just like a for loop, basically. And we're gonna send it the request and the response. And in the last place right here, this is if I just cut this out, this will be the callback. And so it'll be this variable, the one that gets called whenever we're done with all the middleware. So I just give it a anonymous function, and we use the use here in order to be able to use these parameters in this closure in here. And whenever the callback gets called, we do the exact same thing as previously. We just invoke the controller function that is the actual logic that we want to execute. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and hopefully it'll run. So let's try it out. All right, so we have some errors. Yes, it says that it must be passed a... you can see there is something going on right here with the namespaces, and it's because it thinks that the request interface comes from the apt/middleware, which is not true because it's a PSR middleware. So so it doesn't really know what these are. So we're gonna need to define it. So use what is it like PSR7. Let's see, HTTP. You know what? Let's just copy it from the controller. because it's the same one. It's the request and response right here. So I'm going to paste it in there, and hopefully now it'll work. And it did. So you can see now I actually gave it the name, so in the end everything was run, everything was fine. But if I remove it now, it's going to give me hopefully a 400, which is a bad request. You can see it works. So this is a way to halt the execution of the system even before the controller is run. And you get this really nice isolated thingy, which just like, if you don't call next, the controller is not going to be executed basically. So what is pretty nice with this is that the next function doesn't even have to be executed before the controller. You can define the validation in what order you like. So for example, let's say that I want to do some, let's comment this out for now, and I'm going to echo in here. The name was fine, like this. And in here, I'm going to echo out the name was not fine. And I'm going to comment this out. Let's see, yeah. And now, instead of running the logic and then running next, I'm going to run next before and then run the execution logic. And let's see what this gives us. Let's put the name back in there. Something like that. And you can see now that it wasn't valid JSON. All right, so there we go. So you can see now that I can define the order of execution for the middleware. So now you can see that first I run the controller and then I run the middleware after the controller was executed. And if I want to switch, so if I want to execute the the middleware first and then the controller, I can basically just have the implementation that I had at first. So mostly you will use middleware and run it before the controller to validate some kind of data or making sure that the user is authenticated or authorized. And we're going to have a look at that later, how we're going to use it. So it's a really powerful notion. And it was quite intensive with all the new stuff that we added. I'm going to remove this and save it. It was quite intensive with the run middleware and everything. So I suggest you read up on callables and about magic methods in PHP, and also that you have a look at how invoke works if you don't get it. And you might also be confused with the namespacing. And so this is a good time to pause the video and read up on all the stuff that you don't get, basically, and maybe you can roll back in the videos and have a look at them again and so on. So hopefully this made sense. And I also suggest you check out the GitHub code and run it and fiddle around a little bit with it so you can see how everything is like put together, and try to var dump and die and all of that. So just walk through the code basically if you have problem understanding it. And this is it for now. I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.